Jeffrey Combs has a new role in the Star Trek universe, and to that I can only say, huzzah! Hi, I'm Phil, welcome to my channel where I talk about all the geeky pop culture that I like, enjoy and consume, things like Doctor Who, Red Dwarf and Star Trek. We are weekly reviewing Star Trek Lower Decks here on this channel, so if you want more of that, don't forget to like, share, subscribe, all that jazz. Today we are talking about episode 7, I think it is. It is called... I always have to consult my paper for this bit because I never remember the name. Where Pleasant Fountains Lie. A very Shakespearean-esque title, wouldn't you say? Before I get into spoilers, I'm just going to quickly say, really enjoyed this episode. There was some great stuff. It was good to see some stuff with Billips and seeing the whole background and what his planet is like. And we'll get more into that in the spoilers. But all of that stuff was absolutely brilliant. And on the other side of the plot, the Boimler and Mariner stuff was good to see some more of their sort of post him going to the Titan friendship and what that has turned into in the character development there. And there was a nice little twist at the end of that, which I really liked, and I thought it did a really good job of showing how Boimler has grown over the series so far. But from here on out there are going to be spoilers, so if you haven't seen the episode, go away, come back, obviously, and then consume this here review. One quick thing I've noticed right at the top of this episode is that we're getting a lot of episodes this season that are starting with the bridge crew. And I'm not sure, the pre-title sequence, I mean, I'm not sure that was so much a thing in the first season. Now, it did happen, but I think it's happening more this season, that we're starting with the bridge crew, and the bridge crew are a lot more involved. I would say the main character of this episode is Billips, and not any of the lower decks even. So though even the lower decks that tie into his storyline, like Rutherford, Rutherford's probably the most involved in his storyline, and even he, I think, takes a little bit of a backseat to Rutherford. I'm not complaining about this. It's good to see the bridge crew a bit, and Billips we haven't seen much of at all, really. We saw a bit of him in season 1, got a little bit of an idea of his character, but there wasn't like a massive amount there, so it is good to see some of him. I do hope that, because I've noticed that they've done this a few times where they've started really heavily on the bridge crew stuff with the pre-title sequence, that we don't lose focus on the lower decks. That is what the show is about, after all. I'm not worried yet. It's just something that popped into my head as this episode started. We get the old Star Trek trope of an evil AI computer manipulating a civilization. And I really like that moment where they were like, oh, at least the captain, after freeing this civilization, and stopping them being at war with each other because this computer has told them to. I can't remember the exact line, but basically says, at least you didn't get sucked in by a load of superstitious nonsense and worshipping gods. And then there's just this awkward look by the guy, and there's this painting behind him of clearly the AI computer in like some kind of shrine being worshipped type pose in a painting. And it's this sort of awkward look, and it's like, yeah, we didn't do that at all. Nope, not us. Nice touch there, like that. And I wondered if this was going to be one of those throwaway sort of openings to just sort of like get us into the bit where then they're on the ship and they get the communication from Billips' homeworld and the queen of that world. And then as Billips come in, we get the real, oh, hello, mother. It's his mum. And that, I thought it was just like a little like fun throwaway bit to lead into that. But it does lead in nicely to the secondary plot of the episode with Mariner and Boimler. So it's kind of nice. I like that it's not completely throwaway, because we had some in season 1 which were like the little flying around buzzy thing that I can't remember what that tried to take over the ship in the opening episode, in the opening skit, and then was never mentioned again. Here it feels better that that this is relevant to something that's going to happen later on in the episode. So as I said, there were 2 plots. We will come back to the Billups stuff because that's my favourite, and I always like to leave my favourite to last. But we do get Mariner and Boimler going off to take the AI ship back to the Daystrom Institute to be studied or housed or safely secured away where it can't do any harm. And Initially, it's just Mariner assigned to this, and Boimler is assigned to a cool mission to go capture some alien centipede thing. And then he gets he's got his rifle, he's polishing his rifle, phaser rifle up, and then he gets reassigned at the very last minute back onto the same thing as Mariner. I liked the fact that this kind of like followed on from last week where he had shown some leadership and impressed Ransom, and he said and he references this, and Ransom has started to see something in him and therefore giving him more of these interesting missions, and nice little bit of character development there. And I was wondering where they were going with the whole, he's been reassigned. And I kind of like what they did with it later on. Because of course transporting it to the Daystream Institute doesn't go smoothly. Obviously, this is Star Trek. They hit an anomaly, their shuttle crashes on some kind of desert planet, and then we get the evil computer trying to manipulate them and trying to get them to agree to plug him into a computer somewhere so that he can, do some stuff and probably try and take over again, because that's what he does. He just wants to get back into a computer, a network computer, so that he can get some power again. Oh, and of course, this AI computer is played by Jeffrey Combs, the sort of Star Trek royalty at this point, because he's played so many characters over so many different series. He was, of course, Weyoun in Star Trek Deep Space Nine, and he was Shran in Star Trek Enterprise. They're his two most prominent roles, but he's also played Ferengi and a few other ones as well. So he's been around quite a while in the Star Trek universe, and it's good to see him make another appearance, if only in voice only. Hopefully, I'm still, fingers crossed, I'd like to see him on Star Trek Discovery as well in the far future, playing some kind of role as well. That would be good. But it's good to see him back, and he does such a good job playing this evil computer. It's sort of slightly over the top, slightly smarmy. It's definitely a comedy computer. You can tell this is a comedy series, because he's not just like one note evil. He's very much like, hey, we can work together. And I really like what he did with the character there of this evil computer, evil manipulative computer. And he's trying to pretend to be their friends. He's going to help them get out of this situation, and he's trying to manipulate them. And he starts trying to manipulate them into conflict after a while. And this is where I initially thought, are they backtracking a bit on some of the development they've had between these two? Because they seem to have got over their issues. The whole, in the last few episodes, their abandonment issues of, like, Mariner being slightly bitter that Boimler went off to the Titan and all that. They seem to have worked through that. But there's still this kind of some kind of tension between them here. And I was, as it ramped up, I was wondering whether or not they'd backtracked a bit too much on the development they'd had so far. But how it turned out in the end, kind of, that was okay, actually. That kind of made up for that, because I liked what they did, especially with Boimler's character at the end there. And I hope that Mariner has finally learned her lesson about Boimler, and the fact that, because that does feel a little bit repetitive, that Mariner just assumes that Boimler's going to mess up. And he's proven before that his way isn't always the worst way. But I do like what they did here. Boimler eventually, after much manipulation, starts siding with the computer, because the computer shows him that Mariner actually asked Ransom to reassign him and convinced Ransom that Boimler wasn't ready for the type of missions that he was being assigned to. And quite rightly, you'd understand that Boimler would feel betrayed at that. And so we see him getting more angry at Mariner, and I thought it was all built up very realistically, in the sense that, like, yeah, he would be pissed off. And yeah, he might start to think, oh, okay, maybe we can use the computer somehow. Even though we as the audience go, no, it's obviously an evil computer that's trying to manipulate you, you can kind of understand where it's coming from, and it kind of felt very believable. What I really like is when he does eventually, he even phases Mariner when Mariner tries to stop him. He says, I don't want to do this, and she thinks he won't do it, and he does, he phases her, and he goes in, because the evil computer has promised to boot up this ship that can then get them out of there. And Mariner doesn't want to do it because it's an evil computer, obviously, and Boimler does. But I love the twist where Boimler, he boots him up and you get this moment of, he plugs him into the computer, this moment of like the evil AI revealing his evil plan and like, haha, now you've done this, I will take over the planet, even the system. And then he's like, nah, I've been using you. That's Boimler. Boimler says, nah, I've been using you. And he hasn't plugged him into the system that the computer thought he had. He'd just been using his battery. Boimler had been using him for his battery power to send out the stress signal. And the whole thing, even getting angry at Mariner, was at least slightly exaggerated to put on a show so that the evil computer would think he generally was on his side. And I generally, as one of the audience, thought he was momentarily siding with the computer here. So, even though I thought it was a bad idea, I understood where he was coming from and why he might do that. So it played really well. I thought it was a great example of Boimler's character growth over the series, because he is, he's shown that he is a competent leader and he can come up with plans and outsmart people, and his growth has been really good, and I think this shows it really well. And then at the very end, the computer gets eventually delivered to the Daystrom Institute and put in a room of other evil computers who are all bickering with each other, which is a nice little reference there. I didn't really look to see if I recognised any of them. Let us know in the comments below if you did. But just like the fact that there's a whole room of these evil computers plotting to take over the universe in in the Daystrom Institute, and they're all just locked up bickering with each other, is great. Now the Billips plot I really liked, because you get introduced to his home society. You find out he's a prince. He is a prince, his mum is the queen, and he abdicated because he didn't want to be king. He wanted to be an engineer in Starfleet, so he abdicated and left his home planet. I love the whole society of his whole planet is really fun. It's all based on like medieval, kind of slightly Shakespearean, and there's dragons and castles, and they all speak in slightly exaggerated medieval language, and wear these frilly collars and all that sort of thing. And you can clearly see, like, right from the off, Billips just does not want anything to do with any of it, really. He just wants his technology. I mean, even on this planet, they have technology, but they mask it in words. They call it names that make it sound more like magic, and I can't remember exactly what they are. I think at one point Rutherford refers to the elf matrix or something like that. And Billips is like, no, don't do that. Don't humour them. So I really like the world they built up here, and his mum wants him to be king. He does not want to be king, but there is a law of their land that if he loses his virginity, he automatically becomes king. And so apparently his mother is constantly trying to trick him into losing his virginity, basically. And it's just hilarious. The whole concept is hilarious. However, this time she claims she's not here to trick him into having sex with someone. She is here because her fleet of ships are breaking down and she actually needs an engineer. So she's come to her son for help. So he takes Rutherford over to the ship with him, and they try and fix the ship. Rutherford, in terms of Rutherford's involvement, I wouldn't say there's much here with him. I would say that how this plot really serves his character is through deepering the exploration of him and Tendy's relationship, which comes a little bit later. Initially, there's a bit where he's worried about fitting in because all this royal sort of upper class society, and how he'll like find that, and it'll be a bit awkward and stuff. Which is fine. That makes sense for Rutherford's character. I didn't find that stuff massively interesting with Rutherford, though. I found the Billups stuff much more interesting. But they fix the ship, and then Billups gets called back to the Cerritos, just as a sort of get out from the captain to get him away from his mother if he wanted to. And then a bit of the ship blows up, and everyone's reported dead, including Rutherford and the Queen. Now, what I was talking about with it being good for Tendi and Rutherford's deepening relationship is the reaction when Tendi finds out that Rutherford has been reported dead clearly shows that he means a lot to her, and I'm sure they are going to end up in a relationship at some point. This is more than friendship. It just feels more than friendship. They've got to, and so the way Tendi reacts, and then she gets determined. She picks up his signal and gets determined to find him, which is important later, because his mum being dead, and having died even, and it kind of him thinking it's his fault because his repair blew up, makes Billups reassess his role as on the ship, and the fact that he thinks he should go and become king, which of course, as he says, means he must perform the royal copulation, which appears to be with the royal guards, who the Queen then says, because the royal guards are apparently trained from an early age to an early age. Did you say early age? That sounds wrong. No, trained from the beginning of their training, I'm assuming. She kind of said early age, surely. That would have been so wrong. Trained from the beginning of their training to skip foreplay. So that get right down to it. Basically her mum, like, while they were doing the repairs, there are women all around sort of dancing slightly erotically and making lewd jokes at Billups and trying to seduce him and things, and to Rutherford at that point earlier on, he's just like, just ignore them, because he's just so used to this shit from his mother that he just glosses over him now, and he's like, yeah, just ignore them, forget about it. So he ends up in this, so he's going to do it, and he ends up in this room, in a bedroom with two of the royal guards, a little threesome situation with one of with the female guard and the male guard and him, and but Rutherford is alive, and so is the Queen, and as Tendi discovers, because she has tracked down his chip, the signal from his chip, and finds them all having a feast, and having realised what's going on, and the fact that this is another trick by the Queen to make him to make Billups lose his virginity and become king, which is what she wants. Rutherford races to the room and to try and stop him, and gets there, but finds out he didn't really have anything to worry about, because Billups couldn't quite perform, couldn't quite get it up. And I love the line when he bursts in, and it's so juvenile, but I love it. Rutherford bursts in and sees the two royal guards just there laying on the bed, half undressed, and Billups isn't there initially, and he's somewhere else in the bathroom, and Rutherford just says, "Did his kingdom come?" So juvenile, but I cracked up laughing at that. And he's not, because he's in the bathroom and he was trying to psych himself up to actually go do it. And so Rutherford got there in time and told him what was going on, and he is saved from having sex. He can keep his virginity and never be king. This was just a really funny episode. I really loved it, and it was just so funny. The Billups stuff was really good, and even though the focus wasn't really on the lower decks, on that, what I would call the main story, I would call the Billups storyline the main storyline here. And the focus was on not on one of the lower decks, which is interesting. I as long as they don't do that too much, I don't mind that. So yeah, really good episode. Really enjoyed it. Found it very funny. The humour on the Billups stuff was great. And like I said, the development of Boimler and Mariner was good. We got the Tendi stuff here as well, because after after they reunite, and she's like, he's joking about how he had a really good time, and I thought it's every week I'm almost dead, and she's like, yeah, and you can see she really worries about him, and I love that deepening of that relationship too. I'm really hoping eventually, maybe by the end of the season, we'll get somewhere with them too, maybe. What do you think? Let me know in the comments below. Let me know what you thought of this episode in the comments below, and I'll be back next week for another Star Trek Lower Decks review. Thank you for watching. I'll see you then. Goodbye.